You ever watch the news, see all this high stakes political drama, and just wonder, how does any of that actually connect to the real world? The roads we drive on, the schools our kids go to, the local hospital. Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today.
Right. This is the core question. How does all that political maneuvering and deal-making eventually result in a newly paved road or a better-equipped classroom? It can feel super abstract, but that link between a vote in parliament and a new hospital wing, well, it affects all of us every single day.
So, to get some real answers, we're going to head to Northeast India and dive deep into the fascinating and, yeah, pretty complex political history of Manipur. It's the perfect case study to see how the type of government you have can totally change what gets built and for whom. All right, first things first, we need to get the lay of the land. What's the deal with Manipur's political puzzle? Why is it so unique?
Okay, so the first thing you absolutely have to get about Manipur's politics is its incredible diversity. I mean, it's a real melting pot. You've got the Métis community, which makes up just over half the population. Then you have various Naga tribes, that's about a quarter, and the Kuki-Zo tribes at around 16%. This rich ethnic mix is the backdrop for everything we're about to talk about. And with that kind of diversity, well, you often get a really fractured political scene. And in Manipur's case, it's led to a history of serious instability. Just look at this number, 10. That's how many times president's rule has been imposed there. That's when the state government basically gets put on pause and the central government takes over. 10 times. That tells you that shaky, unstable coalitions haven't just been an occasional thing. For a long time, they were pretty much the norm. Okay, so if we're going to analyze how these different governments actually performed, we need a tool, a clear framework to help us measure things. Let's introduce the key concept for this explainer. And that big idea is something called state capacity. It sounds a bit academic, but it's actually super simple. Think of it as the government's engine for getting stuff done. Does the government have the horsepower to actually design a policy, build the thing, and then keep it running smoothly? A government with high state capacity has a powerful, well-maintained engine. One with low capacity, well, it's sputtering, stalling, and probably not getting you very far.
All right, with that in mind, let's look at our first era. Let's pop the hood and see how this engine was running under one particular type of coalition government. So, for a really long stretch, from 2000 all the way to 2017, Manipur's government was what you'd call a dominant partner coalition. Basically, you had one big party in charge, in this case, the Indian National Congress, and they were the anchor, holding a bunch of smaller parties together. So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, it meant the Congress Party held all the key cards. They ran the big, important ministries. We're talking finance, education, health. The smaller coalition partners, they didn't really have the power to say no to major policy ideas. The result was that you got a more unified and coherent long-term agenda. Now, political favors still happened, of course, but the big party's dominance kept it somewhat in check. And what were the results on the ground? Honestly, it was a mixed bag. On the one hand, you saw real progress in education. School enrollment shot up from 62 to 78% in about a decade. That's great. But then you look at health. Maternal mortality went down, which is good, but it was still lagging behind the national average. And infrastructure, it was pretty uneven. Some projects seemed to pop up in areas that, coincidentally, were the home turf of a coalition partner. So you had progress, sure, but it was slow and steady with some pretty big gaps. Okay, now let's fast forward. A new era begins, and a totally different kind of coalition takes over. And believe me, this changed the game entirely. After 2017, the whole political dynamic in Manipur shifts. We move from that dominant partner model to something much more, let's say, volatile. It's called a competitive alliance, this time led by the BJP. The key difference here is that power is spread out a lot more among the partners, which creates a completely different set of pressures on the government. And one of the biggest changes, maybe the biggest, was money. A whole lot of it. See, now you had the same party in power in both Manipur and at the central government in Delhi, and suddenly the floodgates opened. Central government funding for the northeastern states didn't just increase, it more than tripled. We're talking a jump from around 29,000 crore rupees a year to over 90,000 crore. That is a staggering amount of cash.
So, the big question is, where did all that money go? And this is where those messy coalition dynamics really come into play. As researcher Yambem Abinash points out, this period saw things like new hospitals being built in very specific, politically important areas. And that raises a huge question. Were these hospitals built where people needed them most? Or were they built to keep political allies happy and hold that fragile coalition together? And this really gets to the heart of the trade-off in this era. It was a classic double-edged sword. On the plus side, having the same party in power at the center meant a fire hose of funding for big-ticket items like highways and railways. National programs got rolled out way faster. But the minus side, the state lost a lot of its autonomy. Sometimes what Delhi wanted wasn't what Manipur needed, and the state lost the flexibility to tailor programs for its own people. And it's so important to remember that behind all this political talk, there are real people with real stories. Take the debate over a controversial law called AFSPA, which gives the armed forces huge powers. For someone like Nina Ningumbum, whose husband was killed in an incident later ruled a fake encounter, this isn't abstract. When politicians make promises about it during elections, it feels hollow. Her words are a heartbreaking reminder that governance isn't just about budgets and roads. It's about justice, security, and sometimes life and death.
So, after looking at these two very different eras, these two very different styles of coalition government, what's the bottom line here? What's the main takeaway from all this?
Let's just break it down side by side. Era 1, the Congress-led dominant partner coalition. The upside was policy coherence. Things were steady. The downside? Progress was pretty slow. Then you have Era 2, the BJP-led competitive alliance. The big dynamic there was that huge influx of cash from the center. But the main challenge was that this money could lead to fragmented, politically driven projects, and the state lost some of its independence. See? Two completely different models, each with its own unique set of pros and cons. And that brings us to the most important point. It's not that one type of coalition is good and the other is bad. It doesn't work like that. The type of coalition doesn't guarantee success or failure. Instead, think of it like a filter. It modulates the outcome. It changes how things happen. It shapes what gets prioritized, how money gets spent, and what kind of political pressures are at play. Which leaves us with one last big question to chew on. When it comes to real, sustainable development, what is the right balance? Is it better to get a flood of development funds but give up some of your local control? Or is it better to have more autonomy, more say in your own affairs, even if it means you have less money to work with? Finding that balance is the fundamental challenge not just for Manipur, but for governments everywhere.